And I'll start that now. There you go. So I will turn it over to Matt Miller now.
Got it. Thank you, Mike. Hi, Tammie.
Hi, Matt.
Um,
Go easy on me, Matt.
oh, we have a small group here, so folks can ask questions. But I wanted to follow up with Mike about your role as a regional science coordinator. What is it you do?
So officially and legislatively mandated, I serve 59 school districts in science, next gen science implementation. And what that looks like is something very different for every district, right? So, and then I also serve as the computer science coordinator as well. So I serve these districts in implementation of computer science standards and our Washington State standards. So, you know, Matt, it just looks, I never have the same day twice, not that I ever did in a classroom either. But it looks very different. So when I get called out sometimes to one of our really small districts like Washtuckna or Oakdale, right, it can look like me just sitting in the back of a classroom and being supportive of the teacher. I've had teachers call me and say, you know, I'm not really sure how this phenomenon-based learning looks. Would you just come out and teach a lesson, show me? And it's like, sure. So I can go out and I can play with kids and teach lessons, or sometimes the teacher just wants me to come observe, or sometimes I just get to walk through classrooms because I get invited to districts, right? They're always looking for money, and they're always looking for, it seems like, a way to implement best practice.
So you travel you travel the 101 Eastern
Yes.
Washington. Okay.
Yes.
So the other thing that folks may not know about you, I mean, if you want to talk about it, is what path did you take to get here?
Oh, okay, so I graduated Coyote-Benton High School, which, if you know Coyote-Benton, it's a little tiny town outside of Richland, Washington, the Tri-Cities. And in my senior newsletter, you know that senior newsletter that they always put out for what the seniors are doing in 10 years? And they said that I would be a teacher. And I'm going to be honest with you, I grew up with 11 siblings. And I said, I'm never getting married. I'm never having kids. And I am never stepping foot in a class. I just want peace and quiet in my life. Because you can imagine the chaos of 11 siblings, right? I mean, chaos. Not even controlled chaos, just chaos. And so I actually went to work for industry. My husband was from Los Angeles, California. So I moved with him, and I got a job at Rockwell International, which was, I worked on the space shuttle and I worked on the Peacekeeper missile, and that's what we did. So I worked in industry, and it was a great work experience. I got to do a lot of really fabulous things. I got to watch them not launch the Peacekeeper missile, but what they do is they practice the launch every year because they want to make sure it comes out of the ground. I don't know if you know that. They want to make sure that the launching mechanism was working. So I got to see that. That was phenomenal. I got to watch them test the space shuttle main engines. I got to go out to Vandenberg and watch the shuttle land. I just got to do some really fun things. And then I had children, and I was a stay-home mom for a couple of years, while they were little. And then when they were really little, my husband would get home at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon from his job. And I said, I just need to go find somebody to talk to. So I volunteered at the Cheney High School. We had moved back, and for family, we had moved back to Washington to Cheney to be near family. And I tutored for about 3 months, and I came home. My husband said, I'm going to go back and get my ed credentials. This is fun. This is fun. Being with kids is a good time. Way easier than being with adults, because they're hilarious, right? So I went back, and that's my path to education. And then I got a job at Cheney Middle School.
Okay.
Yeah. So thanks, Matt, for asking. That's kind.
Sure. Well, I knew you'd done some kind of rocket something.
Yeah, my favorite line in class was, "This isn't rocket science," and trust me, I know. This isn't it.
It's a different thing. Well, I thought we'd start with these larger questions, and then feel free to really go into depth on things that you're passionate about. I guess the biggest thing, the number one big question that we had here was, we need to do science education well across systems, districts, schools. What do you personally think? This is a big context setting questions. What do you think is at stake when we talk about science education needing to be done well?
You know, I don't want to be dramatic at all, right? I don't, but I tend to be. And our entire future as a species is online, right? You see how well we handle viruses, right? It creates utter chaos, globally created utter chaos. And I remember when it first hit, and I don't know if I can say this, but the person who was in charge of our country came out and said, we have this completely under control. And I looked at my husband and I said, I hope every kid who ever walked through my classroom is watching this and able to say, no, we don't. No, we're not. No, we don't. And that's because when I would teach viruses, we would teach about how quickly they expand, how like it's so unsuspecting, right? And they containing a virus is not a small, obviously a small lift, right? So and then the other thing I think about is, and I'm not trying to be gloom and doom, but I think about the future of our species. In fact, I teach a climate change class for Whitworth on Wednesdays. And the other day, one of the students, and this is really hard for me because these are adults, right? And they said, Tammie, do you think our species is going to survive? And I said, it kind of doesn't feel like it sometimes, right? I mean, like I'm looking at climate change and I'm looking at, I remember being back in the 70s as a middle school student. And scientists were saying, you know, we really got to get this under control. Like this, the trajectory is not good. And we're in the year 2022, and the trajectory is still not good, right? And it's worse than ever. And it's just really interesting to me. So I think what's on the line if we don't get science education right is we get people that can't critically think about what's going on globally, right? And I think everything's at stake. Matt, was that an easy answer for you?
Well, yes, because the question really is a trap door.
It is a trap door.
And unfortunately, it's now sprung and it reveals this. So maybe science education hasn't been going so well. What changes do you see that need to be done? I mean, and take your pick. We're at a system, district, school, classroom level. Have your way with that. What changes do you think we need to see?
Okay, so I oh my gosh, so many. I look at our education system, and I have a really good friend. Her name is Dr. Lindsay Portnoy. She teaches out of Boston at a college, and we talk frequently. And she said, Tim, we just need to blow this system up. And I said, I think we do. I get that there's an infrastructure, but when you think about the fact that this education system was built in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and has not changed, like it doesn't. I'm sitting in a classroom right now, and I'm not ripping on the university where I'm sitting, but there's all these rows, and I think this education should not look like this anymore. And I'm not trying to be negative about education, but I can tell you when we went in, when I was working on the shuttle program, we would go into what they called war rooms. And it was like it was to get updated on every single bit of hardware that we needed in-house to build the shuttle. And here's the other thing. When you walked into those rooms, nobody said, is this the ELA portion of our day or is this math? It's just integrated. It's just a mess. And if you've never seen Apollo 13, where that guy walks in with that box of stuff and dumps it, that's the way the world works right there. I can't tell you how many times, I mean, I'm watching that show going, I can't tell you how many times that happened. I can't tell you how many times that happened while we were trying to launch the shuttle. And here's the other thing. If I have to tell you, and I used to tell kids, if somebody has to tell you how to do your job and do it for you, like write the report, you're not needed, right? You need to be able to figure things out. And when we were busy, I can't tell you, we would get up and go to work, and it's all about problem solving almost every minute of every day. And there's no formula. If you've seen Hidden Figures, that's another brilliant one, where the lady is working and there's this big math formula on the chalkboard, and that machine needs to go into orbit, figure it out. And there's no instructions there. There's not a cookbook recipe of instructions. And what I think is sad is that science for a long time is about cookbook recipes. And if you look at lab books in education, They're about getting to the right answer. And I think that needs to change. I think we're teaching, I think science historically has been taught in a way that we need to change it, right? My favorite is when I was in a classroom, and I miss it terribly. Kids would walk up and they'd go, "Do I need the red one or the green one?" And I'd go, "Sure." Like, figure it out. Like, there does not need to be a formula for you to follow to do this. There's no right way to do science. There's a ton of ways to do science. Figure out how. Did I answer your question, Matt?
Yes. So
Tammie, can I follow up on that a little bit?
Sure.
Please, you are free to say anything you like.
Yeah, well, I appreciate what you're saying. And it seems to me we could talk about what you're asking for in science across the board, because fundamentally, systemically, things are pretty intractable, to say the least. But it really got me thinking about my own kid, who I just got off the phone with in Chicago a couple minutes ago. And he's now an adult, but he used to be a kid, and he used to go to Lewis and Clark, and he used to be a pretty good math student. And he had Rick Biggerstaff, and he was a really good math teacher. And when basically came home one night between his junior and senior year, and he says, "I'm thinking about taking calculus BC next year, Dad." He said, "But and I'm pretty good at math, obviously." I mean, literally, this is the conversation. He said, what do you do if you're good in math?" Now he's 17 years old. He said, "What are you good at? If you're good at math, what do you do with it?" And I said exactly sort of what you said. Well, how do we put people on the moon? How do we build tunnels, across the English Channel? I mean, you can go on and on and on, but nowhere in his education. He's one of the top dogs. He wasn't some guy that was just in the middle getting missed by everybody. He was a player, and no one ever took the time to say, "Well, you guys are all bright. You're all taking calculus A, B, or whatever the first one was. Let's talk about what people do with this stuff." Never happened.
Yeah, and Cleve, I have my own story if you don't mind me sharing it. So little tiny town, I want you to picture, we have one math teacher who was higher math. Her name was Lucille Carter. Little old lady, loved her dearly. And she taught all the math. Like, she taught all the higher math. So when I was a senior, there were 3 of us in calculus, only 3, right? And I remember, and I always had to take an independent study because little tiny town, right? But I remember being in the back of the room, right, while she was teaching trig, but she would, work with me every day. And one day we were designing something for the Voeg. They needed a roof or something, and I was figuring out the angles using calculus. And I remember sitting there going, "Oh my God!" And little Mrs. C, short little thing, she comes running back and she goes, "Oh my gosh, Tammie, did you get today's lesson?" I said, "No, I just got the last 4 years of math. I finally understand why we do this." And the sadness is, it should not take 4. And I felt bad for her because I was not trying to insult her, but she was the higher math. And she just looked at me, and this poor little lily. And all I'm saying is, it should not take 4 years of math to understand mathematics. Right. And here's the thing. I taught math at middle school, and the curriculum we adopted, and Cheney's a good school, and I loved being there. So please don't hear anything negative. But when I look at it, I think there's no application, and the application is the part that matters. Right. But I will say this, Cleve, when new kids would get assigned to me, they'd come in, and for the first few days, they'd say, "When are we ever going to need this?" And the whole class in unison would just yell out, "No, like Schrader's going off. No, that's her quarter." Like, let me just tell you how you're going to use it. Let me tell you when you're going to need it. Right. And I love, like, if you've seen Stand and Deliver, where Escalante tells them, "What do you want to do? You want to drive it, or do you want to design it?" Right. I mean, that's what calculus will do for you. So I wholeheartedly agree with you, Cleve.
So you've been trying to move change, initiate change, get people to loosen up the boundaries of their consciousness, to open up to potentially some of the things that you believe are important. Why the hell is it so difficult to make that happen? I mean, we were talking yesterday, right? About
Right.
the existential crisis of the climate change you're bringing up at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
Where does that get taught? I mean, in an intentional curriculum.
Well, here's the problem.
Biology, chemistry, physics.
And here's what I think is the problem. And this is, please do not hear me ripping on anything except the system these kids are sitting in. Right. I get kids in 7th grade. That's what I taught. And I would say, how many of you like science? Most kids go, we hate it. And I'd say, why do you hate science? How can you hate science? We blow crap up. Right. And they'd be like, you know what? Because it's just book reading. And I'm like, no, that's not science. Like books are a reference. But that's not science. And that's not science education. And the sadness is that we are not teaching in a way that kids learn. And man, if you thought we weren't 10 years ago or when I was in high school, we're really not now. Kids are brilliant. And we need to find their brilliant spaces. But the barriers are a lot. There's a lot of barriers, right? I think we need good leadership in schools that will allow people. I was always so fortunate. Mike Stark and Adam Swinyard were my leadership, and they let me tell you my favorite story with Dr. Swinyard. One day, we got a brand new building and we had these finger wings, right? And I see him walking near one of the fingers, and I kind of start looking out the window, and I get real quiet, and the kids get real quiet because I'm real quiet. And he knocks on the back door, because there's a door outside that's required in science classrooms. And I say to the kids, okay, so this is going to go really well, or it's really not. Wait a minute. And the kids are like, what? And I open the back door, and Dr. Swinyard says, do you know there's a swimming pool being filled up out here? And I said, yep. He goes, do we know why there's a swimming pool being filled up out here? I said, well, yeah, we're building underwater robots. And if you build underwater robots, you have to test them. And he said, okay, and when are we doing that? I said, 4th period. He said, I'll be back. And I said, okay. But I remember thinking, right, is that the line where they're going to say, Schrader, you can't fill a swimming pool up outside. You just can't be doing this stuff. But they were
I spent an hour with him, Tammie, yesterday.
He's
Adam.
Lovely.
And I was up in the 4th floor of the head shed downtown. And I said that we just got off a Zoom call with you. And he just sort of lit up. He said, Tammie Schrader, she is one of my favorites, blah, blah, blah. He went on.
That's kind of him. That is so, but what I'm saying is that kind of leadership, he would just let me do what I wanted to do. And it served kids, right? My favorite was when I went to him and I said, there's this content around how to program video games. And I think we ought to let kids try it, right? And he, of course, looked at me and he said, what do you know about video games? I said, nothing, but I don't need to. I know enough. They can do it. And what was really funny is I show him the content online. He gets on there and he's like, Schrader, we need to do this next quarter. I said, well, next quarter is next week, right? I don't even have a lab signed up. He goes, well, then why are you still standing here? Go get that, go make that happen. I mean, that's the kind of visionary leadership that matters. And his the principal at the time was a man named Mike Stark, and I can't say enough about him either. He just would in fact, this is funny. He was gone the day that Adam Swinyard said, yeah, let's just teach programming video games, right? So I went to the counselor and we got everything changed and blah, blah, blah. And we got the computer, lab signed up, and Mike Stark came back on Monday, and I'm walking across the commons, and Mike says to me, can you explain to me how we're teaching one class on Thursday? I'm only gone a day and now we're teaching video game programming. And I said, well, it's a kind of a story. And he goes, you know what? I'm just going to be grateful I wasn't gone more than one day. Like Schrader, you just kind of but you know what? Not to be rude, programming video games, calligraphy. You tell me what serves children, right? And the fact that we had standing room only and a wait list a mile long, right? And by the way, every adult in the building wanted into, and not to teach it, they wanted in to sit in on it. It was great. And we had the very, very best time. And Mike Stark said something to me. He said, Tammie, tell me you're a day ahead of those kids. And I said, Mike, I was 5 minutes ahead of them until they logged in, right? I don't need to be ahead of them. What I need to know how to do is create experiences and prompts for them to leverage their learning. Can I tell you one more story? I'm sorry, Eric. Can I tell one more story about this class? So I have little Jacob, and I want you to picture little Jacob. He's a little redhead, really little seventh grader. And he says to me, or one time, so we have the whole class working. And one of the things that really I learned a lot about was I was so worried that kids would get in that class and do this. And I thought, I don't want kids zoning into a computer screen, but they did the opposite. They would just collaborate with anybody across the room. Didn't matter. Hey, how did you get this game to do this, this, and this? And then they would all problem solve, right? Anyway, little Jacob, he's stuck, and he says to me, he says to his classmates, hey, you guys, I need some help. And they're like, Jacob, just give us a minute. Well, you know how patient middle schoolers are. Not. And finally, I said, I picked up and I'm raising my hand, and I'm like, Jacob, pick me, I can help you. And he looked at me, and the look is this. Like you're a 50-year-old woman, what do you know about programming or video games? And I said, Jacob, come on, let me just try it if I bomb, you know. And he goes, okay. So I sit next to Jacob and I say, tell me what you tried. And he said, I've tried A, this whatever A was. And he said, I've tried B and I've tried C. I said, okay, so you've tried A, B, and C. Have you tried a combination of any of that? And he goes, no. So then he looks back at it and he goes, okay, I'm going to try a combination of something. And it worked. Whatever it was he did, it worked. And I have to tell you, for 5 whole seconds, I was the smartest person in that room to him. And the look on his face was fabulous, because he just looked at me and he went, and then he said, Mrs. Schrader, how did you know that? And I said, here's the thing, Jacob, whether you're launching a space shuttle or solving how to program a video game, problem solving is problem solving. You tried, you have a list and you eliminate things, and you're right. So Eric, thank you for letting me tell that story, but that's, it's true. Problem solving is problem solving. I don't care what the problem is.
Yeah, if I could jump in, I hear you talking about, innovative teachers are clearly needed for this change.
Yes.
Flexible, visionary administrators that let cool things happen are needed. Yes. We could probably look at every part of the system and look at that. I guess I'm wondering from you, like, where do you think the biggest leverage point is? If we could lean on something to try to get this change happening a little faster or a little wider, where's the leverage?
Okay, so I think in my world now, because now that I have access to 59 school districts and teachers, it's really easy to go to schools and go, okay, I can find teachers. I think one of the biggest barriers to all of it is, and I love you, Deb Tully, higher ed, right? Higher ed moves pretty slow, but I think you get innovative people at higher ed, and you can start moving that, because what that does is that helps teachers that are pre-service teachers when they walk. But here's the thing, and I tell them when I teach with them, you're going to walk into a system and you're going to have to play in the system somehow, right? You can't just go blow it all up. The other thing that I really think we should start leveraging is our politicians. Because I sat in a meeting once, this is a long time, like 5 years ago, and we had a bunch of 6th graders. And I was lucky enough to be in the room because I was doing something else there, you can imagine. But these 6th graders came in with all these robotics, and they said to these legislators, they just did a presentation, and one of the little girls said they programmed a hand to do sign language. And one of the little girls said, yeah, we didn't bring all 12 of our motors because we just couldn't get them into this room, like it would have been a problem. So we're using a pneumatic device to show you how this is working. And one of the senators said, what's a pneumatic device? And I thought, yes, that's the question, right? These 6th graders are doing some really pretty cool stuff. And I think we need to start leveraging the people who are making policy, right? Because the sadness about policy, and I don't want to get into politics, is that policy gets passed, and by the time it rolls down to my classroom, it doesn't look anything like what it was supposed to look like. When they built No Child Left Behind, I actually got to sit in the Department of Ed, and one of the people, he was head of technology, his name's Richard Collada, and Joseph South. They said to me, Tammie, how did Common Core? We created Common Core to give teachers license to be creative. And I said, let me tell you how it played out in my classroom, because by the time it leaves you, then it heads to the state, and then it heads to our districts, and then it rolls down to me. And by the time I get it, it looks like, good Lord, we're canceling music and we're doing twice the math and ELA, which makes no sense to me at all. And I'm not trying to rip on politicians. I'm just saying sometimes what things don't always make sense. And I think we need to bridge that gap. So Eric, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I that's what I wondered. Yeah, and I think sometimes as an educator, I feel like I'm so busy in my daily life and all that, but yet, I remember when I went through my admin university program, and there's that part of the whole, there's all these different chunks of being a good administrator. And one of them is, what are you doing in the community or legislatively? What are you doing about policy? And it's the land that you never seem to have time to be in, but it's the place where we probably could have the greatest impact. And man, we just don't do it. And, there is some there, and I get what you mean, how sometimes the intent was there. Legislators approach these things with good intent, but then how it ends up getting churned by our machine, that smashes it back down to something that fits into a system that's all messed up. It just doesn't get what the legislature.
It doesn't play.
So
yeah. Okay.
Hey, Tammie, I got a question.
Okay.
I've been thinking a lot as you've been talking and the rest of the crew's been talking about what really good science education looks like today. If we were to go out and say we should be doing more of that right there. Because it's one thing to say, yeah, we need to shift the system, we need to find leverage points. And it's another to say, look, there is good science education going on, but what does it look like and how do we duplicate it? Like, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I got to visit Dan Shea's classroom in North Central. And that was mind-blowing to me. That was like no science classroom I've ever been in. And students were literally on fire about what they were doing. They couldn't wait to tell me about the work that they were doing. And they were all doing something different in little teams. And they had long-range projects. And they were super engaged, And I asked one of the students, like, well, what happens in this classroom, the kind of engagement I'm seeing, why you guys are so on fire about this, does this happen anywhere else in the school? And they said, no, this is the only class it happens. But I look forward to my 2 hours in this class more than anything else that's happening. How do we make
And there's
that
the
happen?
answer.
Yeah.
How do we make that happen? Well, first of all, I think, like, if you're asking me for systems change, what I know about system change is change happens at the speed of trust, right? And trust is based on, oh, that's okay. Do you need in here? No. Okay. Sorry, you guys, I'm at a college campus because, anyway, it doesn't matter. So what the point is it's all about relationships, right? And can I just tell another story? So I am working next door to somebody in Cheney School District who doesn't believe in state standards, doesn't believe in anything like that. And one day he walks into my classroom because we shared an office, and he sees all these books, right, on designing experiments, whatever. He goes, what is all this stuff? And I said, oh, those are my books on, pedagogy and how to teach science well and how to have kids interacting with it, la, la, la. And he goes, oh, can I borrow some of these? And yeah, sure. Okay. So the next thing I know, he comes in, he goes, so I'm thinking about how you do things in here. And I said, okay. And he said, can you just look at some of my work and kind of tell me what you think? So I looked at some of his work and I said, well, if you want to make this more student-centered, I'd do X, Y, Z, right? And the next thing I know, my principal comes in and he goes, okay, so I just want you to know that this guy was in a meeting for the school, and he said, you don't got to worry about science education. Schrader and I've got it all figured out down there, or whatever. It was, made me laugh. But here's the thing. I think change happens at the speed of trust, right? And when people come in and they can see science education happening, that speaks to them, right? But I think one of the things we need to provide teachers is ways to get out and see good science teaching. Like I can tell, and I'm going to speak for myself. I remember once walking into a room and the teacher had X's on the floor where the chairs went. At the end of the period, kids knew that they put the chair back on the X or the desk or wherever, because it was chaos, right? And I thought, I never thought about doing that. That's a good solution to that problem, right? is just so that kids know where it goes back at the end of the night. We don't have to try and straighten it up every freaking day or period. And I thought, if teachers could collaborate more. One of the things that shocked me when I left NASA and went into a classroom was the lack of collaboration. Like, I wasn't expecting that. Everybody collaborates. They all do. And it's not personal. Like when you would go into these war rooms and people were pushing and shoving on how to get this thing manufactured, nobody took it personal. It was just information. And when I walked into education, two things struck me is that it really wasn't collaborative. And that was back in the year 2000, I think was my first contract. And it wasn't as collaborative as I was used to. And teachers voted on everything. And I even said to my principal, don't you just sometimes make decisions and tell us this is how it's going to be? Like, I can't imagine spending 3 hours spending time discussing one word on a mission statement. And I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying, is this how this works? Because this is weird. This is weird to me.
Yeah.
But and Mike, all I can say is I think what we need to do is find the Danny Shays, right? I think there are teachers out there that would be blown away if they walked into his area, right? And simply because they don't know that can be the way it is. And by the way, that should be the way it is. Because Danny's, even when I had Danny, I was his pre-service instructor when he was at Gonzaga, and I didn't teach him anything, by the way. He came brilliant, just so you know. But one of the things about Danny was it's always about the real world. It's always about real world problems. And here's what I don't like. There's a lady, she was a technology advisor under Obama, and I had the fortune to see her speak. And she said, I just don't understand why we're making up problems for kids to solve. Why don't we give them the $1 billion problems we're facing? And I thought, let's do that. I'll follow you anywhere. Let's do that.
So you did real world problems. Climate change is a hoax. Talking about race is absolutely critical race theory. Talking about gender and anything else is absolutely taboo. I mean, real life problems. How do we even now talk about real life problems when every single real life problem that a smart person would want to be talking about is being challenged and threatened? And, I mean, this has gotten crazy. I mean,
I agree.
Adam
One
and
of
I.
Yep.
Anyway.
And I'm going to just tell you, I don't think I avoid any of those topics because here's the thing, and again, I'm going to go back to relationship. I had a little girl walk in, her name is Megan, cute as a button. And she walked up to me, and she's very right-wing Christian. And she said to me, I just want you to know, I was teaching her science. So, the age of the earth is going to come up. And she said, I just want you to know, you're not going to convince me that there is no God. And I said, okay, well, how about we make a deal? I'm not going to try and convince you there's no God. We'll make another deal. At any time, if you are uncomfortable with anything that's being talked about in this classroom, you have the right to stand up and walk out and go sit take a deep breath, because I'm not going to try and sell you anything. I'm here to teach science. And what was really cute is this little, by the way, she and I are friends on Facebook to this day. She's cute. And she and I are really we have a good relationship, right? She never left during any of it, right? When we started talking about the age of the earth and formation, never. And my point is, I think there are ways to approach subjects that don't have to be like my very favorite moment in teaching of all time, 15 years in it, was we were talking about genetics. And we were having a big class discussion, a Socratic discussion on genetics and things that are passed down from parents, right? And we started talking about the amount of pigment we have in our skin, and I have 11 siblings. So I'm a genetic, I'm a genetic experiment in the making, right? And I talk about how one of my sisters is blonde and blue-eyed and has fair skin, where the rest of us, we're French Canadian. Most of us have more pigment and we're darker and have dark hair or whatever. And one little boy raised and he goes, so the pigment's just hereditary. And I said, yeah, the amount of pigment you have in your skin is hereditary. And we would talk about these sliding scales of, how tall you are, the how dark your eyes are, whatever. He said, well, that makes racism pretty stupid, don't you think? And now we can talk about racism. And now we can talk about critical race. And now we can talk about those things, right? But we can do, and what I love though is kids are so much more reasonable than adults, right? Because this kid, we just start having this conversation and nobody gets wrapped around the axle. We are just having a conversation, right? Evolution is another really big one.
Yeah.
That has always been like, are you kidding me? And I'm not here to convince. And I had one little girl, her name was Heather when I was student teaching. Well, probably still is Heather, but she came up to me and she goes, and she was clearly distraught. And she said, Miss Schrader, I'm worried about you. And I said, okay, what are you worried about? She said, well, you're teaching evolution. And she said, I'm worried that you're going to hell. And she was not kidding. She was clearly, and I looked at her and I said, Heather, okay. I said, can I just tell you something? Or can we just talk about that for a minute? She goes, yeah. I said, do you know that I love you? And she goes, yes. I said, well, and I have to tell you, I think you love me. Why don't we just hold that space, right? And not like all of this, we're just talking science. We don't have to, and what I'm saying about all of this is, believe it's all about relationship. And I agree that I think, the boards, blah, 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 all of that gets involved. But I also think that the way you change people's opinion is to be in relationship with them and have conversations. And can I tell you another great conversation to highlight what I'm talking about? So I got invited to the White House to talk about creative teaching. And there were about 30 of us in there, and we broke up in two teams of 15. And this made me laugh because the people that were at the table were White House representatives and the Department of Ed. And there were some higher ed people there. I think I was the only teacher, and they said, Tammie, we think we should bring creativity back into classrooms. And I said, okay, I'm all for that. And they started talking about how that would look. And I said, well, before we move too far, please know that as a teacher, I have to meet state standards. And they look and they go, well, you can be creative with state standards. And I said, I would agree. Like, okay. And then they start talking some more. I said, one more thing, sorry. And I said, these kids are required to take a test at the end of that, right? So just to know that I got to teach these standards and we've got a state test that holds, and they're like, okay, well, that's still okay. We can run it. And about the third time I interrupted, I said, I just want you to know that the Department of Ed right now, this was under Arnie Duncan. I said, the Department of Ed is trying to hold teachers accountable for those state standard test scores. Like my evaluation depends on how well those kids do on that state test. And then this guy looked at me, he goes, well, Tammie, this is just ridiculous. If I were a teacher, I would just teach to the test. And I said, and there we have it. Like I already know that, and I could have said that. But there are ways to shine lights on things to make people realize, and I said, and by the way, I just want you all to remember, no teacher in their right mind voted for that. That was your Department of Ed. That came out of here. So just be clear that if we're teaching to the test, you guys created a system that we needed to play in, right? I mean, so when we talk about things like creativity, I think people genuinely want creativity. I think they've just created a system where it kind of locks us in. Okay, Matt, have I gotten off the rails?
I have a question for you regarding in secondary, especially. You've got me thinking about in terms of policy, and I think we're going to see more of this than less from the state board, and that is sort of a bifurcation when you get halfway through secondary high school. That is, you have students that clearly self-identify and say, I really want to be in science. I want to work in science. I'm going to go do the university thing. And so there's going to be a sort of a track but then there on another side, there's something called the citizen scientist. There's someone who's saying, I'm not going to be that scientist. I'm going to go over here. What are your thoughts about policy that might inform pathways that differentiate? versus everybody gets the same kind of, I know we've been talking about instruction methodology and whatnot, but do you see that as being an advantageous pathway for the state board to take or not?
Okay, so I don't want to pretend to know how to run a state board of ed, right? So I'm not, but I will say this.
That's
If
fair,
you-
but I do that every
Right.
day. So
Okay, so what I want to say is this. I just left On Track Academy yesterday, right? We had a kid. I mean, I can't even tell you everything I saw, but one of the things I walked in and this kid is a rapper. And I don't even like rap, but I said to him, okay, can I listen to it? And he said, yep. So he lets me put on the hearing, and he's got this probably one of the best rap songs I've ever heard. And it was rapping, and there were swear words in it, and it was great. It was the best. And I said to him, how did you do this? And he goes, oh, there's this program that lets me do this, this, and this, and I can do this, this, and this. And I just looked at him and like I couldn't create that in a million years. I couldn't do it. And he was brilliant. And then I walked down the hall and we've got kids driving robots. And I said, how'd you know how to program these? And they said, well, this is how I did it. And I said, very cool. By the way, go work for JPL and let's work on the Mars mission, right? And my point is, kids, if we will listen to them, they will tell us what they're passionate about. And then I got to go see this lady, this one cute kid. And she's designing her own clothing line and she's building her own jewelry. She doesn't have any tech is not on her radar. And that's okay, right? Because she is going to do some really creative, brilliant things in her life. There's no doubt in my mind. And here's the thing. Science is everywhere. All of that is science, right? I'm sorry, but when you start designing clothing and textiles and whatever, that's all science. And I'll tell you another thing. The color coordinating, that's science too. And she is a freaking rock star. And I said to her, how did you get started? She goes, well, my mom helped me because I was getting stressed all the time. And I decided I wanted to be creative. And so I was. That's amazing. That is amazing work they're doing there. I'll tell you another place I've been to is Gizmo out in Coeur d'Alene, where it's a big makerspace. And all those kids are doing work, but they're all doing different work. And they're doing the work that feeds their soul, right? So they're all making games, or they're doing woodwork, or there's sewing machines out there, and there's quilting tape arms out there. I mean, they got everything. And I got to talk to two girls that were busy. They bought I want to try and describe this. They bought a trailer, almost like a horse trailer, but it was empty. And the girls are out there and they're putting the shelves in and they're, screwing everything in and they're using drills. And I said to them, who taught you how to use the drill? And they said, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so. And I said, okay. And I said, and then they just let you have it. And they said, yeah. I smiled. I said, well, yeah, my husband will show me how to use a drill for an hour and a half and I never touch it. Like, because he won't let me out. I'm not ripping on my husband. He's a lovely man. But, right. And I just think how powerful for those girls to be able to do whatever they want to do. All I'm saying that is the avenues have to be opened up and we have to start doing what feeds kids, because we don't get to pick what motivates them at all. You don't get a choice. You don't get a vote. Nothing. So what you do is you find what motivates them. Oh my God. One time I did a systems project and I had a kid come in and goes, I want to compare the system to the internal combustion engine. And I just stared at him. You know what I know about my car, Matt? My car is yellow. That's what I know about my car. I know how to unlock it. That's what I know. My husband came to me and he goes, we're going to need a new car soon. What do you want? I said, I want a green car. And he said, what kind of car do you want? I said, I want a green car. That's what I know. I don't have to know about cars. So I had to actually go figure out how an internal combustion engine worked at the time so that I could, kind of talk him through but he knew he fixed lawnmowers all the time on his dad's farm. Okay.
So Tammie, one of the
Yeah,
things
Michael.
that's in common of some of the things you're talking about is that you're describing spaces where people are making space for kids to pursue what they're interested in, and then saying, oh, by the way, what you're doing is science and here's why. Right?
Exactly.
And that's the exact opposite of most of what the big box schools do.
I know.
Why? Why can't we simply take a lesson? If On Track can make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, and here's the other thing that made me kind of smile. When we got sent home for the pandemic, the big question obviously for me was, Tammie, how do we get science in the hands of kids? And I said, science was always in the hands of kids. What we did, and we forget that we did this, is we built classrooms to teach science. We made up experiments, we made up models, we did all this stuff. But that's not really where the science is happening. Science is actually happening wherever the kid is, whatever the kid is doing. And they're like, well, but they don't have equipment. I said, the heck, they don't have equipment. Let me just tell you, do you know where this glass comes from? Because you start looking into that, and the fact that this is sand under pressure that should blow your mind. It does mine. And here's the thing I talk about too around computer science. When we think about computer science, people always think about computers or phones or electronics. It's like, no, look around the room right now where you are, and every single thing you're touching has been touched by a computer, because unless somebody is hand carving the table you're sitting at, that table went through a machine and somebody programmed. Right? You can't get away from science. Nothing. You cannot get away from machine operating things. You can't. It just isn't going to happen. I had a discussion with a kindergarten PE teacher. God, he was lovely. And I said, everything is STEM, everything. And by the way, if you think that's true of science and computers, it's true of social studies, it's true of everything, right? Because it's all mixed together. And he said, Tammie, not everything is STEM. I don't believe. So we gave this 5-day workshop. And at the end, I said to him, his name is John Paul, he's Canadian. And he said, Tammie, I don't agree that everything is STEM. And I laughed and I said, okay, cool. Here's your homework. When you find something in the universe that is not STEM, I want you to email me. And let me tell you, I'm going to push back. Everything's STEM. Everything. It's the way the world works, right? And Cleve, going back to your problem of giving kids, I remember once I'm in a classroom and I want to know if kids can measure. I want to know how they're measuring because I'm kind of doing a pre-assessment. So I say, hey, we're going to do this airplane lab. Throw some airplanes. Whoever goes the farthest gets the 1 billion points. I'm like, I don't even care. And by the way, we built this education system that's not even like, it's a game. We built this game called education where we give out. I thought kids would be like, is this worth points? Yes, you can have 1 billion points. And then look at me and I'd be like, what is the point? Like, have as many as you want. I don't care. It's for me. And kids would be like, but I love it because I remember when I gave that assignment, over half the class just kind of sat there. And I said, you guys, we got paper. Let's make some paper planes. And they're like, Ms. Schrader, we don't know how to do that. Over half a class. And I said, I'm concerned. We're about to hand you some global issues that are out of control that you're going to need to solve. And you can't figure out how to make a paper plane. Like engage with it and get it handled. Like, I don't know how you're going to make a plane, but you can make, like, we have paper. That was the only criteria, right? Okay. Matt, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Or Michael? I don't remember. I'm sorry. I'm losing track. Thanks for letting me get so passionate about everything.
I can jump in. You popped something up for me that I think is a problem in the system, and maybe
Only one?
Yeah, maybe you've seen where the solution is. I spend hours and hours and hours in this somewhat innovative school that I'm in, trying to figure out how to play the credit game. And you got kids who have to fill a spot in a graduate record sheet. And then every time you try to innovate, you run into that, well, the kid has to be in Skyward to get counted for your FTE. So they have to be in Skyward in the system in a way that maps back to science as the credit. And then the teacher that is the primary teacher for that class has to be the highly qualified science teacher. And then you go to do hiring, and instead of trying to find the right person, you have to try to find someone that has a science / whatever degree, even though, like you said, they're all integrated. And if you find somebody that's super smart at science and they happen to have a history degree, who cares? I struggle with, if I'm the individual responsible for hiring the people teaching in my building, and it's my job to vet whether they're competent enough to do the job I'm asking them to do, but that's all taken out of my hands because I have to meet these requirements. Anyway, is mastery-based learning the answer to this? Competency-based is, how do we get out of this systemic problem of I've got a box to fill and now it dictates every other part of the system that is all screwed up?
It's driving the bus. Yeah. So Eric, first of all, let me tell you something. I've been asked to join a principal superintendent program, right? And this problem you're talking about is exactly why I won't. I don't want to solve those kind of problems. I just want to go have fun, right, with kids. The second thing I'm going to tell you is I think it might. And the good news is you've got a state board of education in Washington. And by the way, when I talk to other states, Washington State has it pretty good. I mean, we may think we don't, but oh my gosh, we do. But I will tell you that I think they've got their eyes on this mastery-based education, and I think it can be done. And if it's done right, it will solve your problem. If it's done well, it will solve your problem. And I know that Senator Wellman, who's the head of the Education Committee, and Congresswoman Santos are really big into this, and they've they've run money, and state board is running a program. They've got 18 schools that are going to participate, and possibly 19. The last I heard, there was one more that was trying to jump on board. And I think that's a problem. I think, Eric, right now it's our best bet.
Yeah, because you know, in order to have more flexibility to get away from this 1,000-hour crap, I have to be an ALE school. And to be an ALE school, you lose, I told you this the other day, I lose my CTE funding.
Yep.
And I'm also told by my central office that we're funded on a different model than the prototypical model. So
My prayer, and by the way, the other guy I was going to mention is Jeff. Oh my God, he's a good friend of mine too, and I can't remember his last name. Out in Odessa. Oh my gosh, he runs a program where kids come in. It's not about books. It's about, he does a genuine research class out there where people come in. One kid, you go there, and of course, Odessa's not huge, but still, one kid is talking to, his kids have won national championships going into research. One of them got sent to London because she came up with a way to expand the volume of a seed, like by growing, I can't even remember, I'm sorry, this was obviously pre-pandemic, growing nodules on these seeds. And what that did was that increased the volume and the uptake of minerals, and it increased the entire agriculture scene. He's got kids, and that's because she was passionate about it, right? And I'm going to be honest with you, if I sat in class and somebody started talking to me about wheat, I don't know how passionate I'd be about wheat, but we got one kid in there, he was trying to design a new skateboard glove so that when he fell, right, less damage.
Let me, if I could go back to Eric's question, because you were on track, Debbie and Mike and I were on track last week. The first thing that comes out of Lisa Matson's mouth is what we do is we hire generalists. There is no such thing as a specialist who's certified and standardized and stamped with a seal of approval in science. So is that, her being able to get around what Eric is suggesting, and I understand, is that because she's got 320 FTEs that are ALE? Is that what we're talking about here?
I don't know, but I will tell you that meeting with Lisa, one of the things that I caught about her, and I've met her over the years, but we got to talk yesterday, she hires people with vision.
Right. Well, not a certificate in a standardized science thing that Eric's talking about. So my question is, why is that doable, 5 miles away from his building? What the hell is the obstacle there? To use the word lever. It doesn't add up.
Yeah, Cleve, I don't know if her saying she hires generalists means she's not hiring certificates trying to fill certain needs. I hire generalists too, but I still have to post positions a certain way. And so the way I get around it here, and this is being recorded, right? How widely is this being shared?
I'm a little scared.
The way we get around it here is that we work together on curriculum. So when we collaborate on curriculum, and I have my social studies specialist teacher is working on and signing off on curriculum, but they may not be the person in that classroom every day teaching that curriculum. So, but it takes a lot of goofy stuff to make all that work. It really is goofy. So I don't know if Lisa, is doing that same thing like I am and kind of making sure she has people that are experts somewhere in that system, or, maybe they can go to the school board, and I know I can do that for one or two. I don't know that I could do it for the whole staff, but you can go to the school board, and if you can prove that they have competence in an area or reason why you need them to do that, you can get an exception, but it's not an easy thing to do, especially for a permanent position. Yeah.
Yeah. And Cleve, you were head of a school district, you would know that better than I would know that. I do know that the feds pulled the highly qualified when they did away with No Child Left Behind.
Yeah, they took away the federal requirement for it, but it didn't take away that school districts still track that and have to publish that.
Yeah.
So
Hey, you guys, we're running right up at 5 o'clock now, and we promised that we would go 1 hour. So, I know we could probably go for a lot longer on this topic, but Tammie, I want to close with one quick question to you. If tomorrow you could change one thing about school systems that would improve science education across the board, just one thing tomorrow, done, what would that be?
Take away standardized testing. Throw it out. Yeah. And actually, I was on a national conference with the Department of Ed, the guy in charge at the department, and it was a pocket lab. Science is cool, and they asked that question. I said, throw it, and the chat blew up with all these teachers going, "Did she just really say that?" Like, yeah, get rid of it. In fact, I have told Dr. Michael Dunn, if I do one thing before I leave education, if I could get rid of standardized testing, that's what I would do. Like, what are we doing? Like, I'm sorry, our kids aren't standardized, right? And even national boards, when I got my national board certification, they based the premise on all these kids you don't have 30 kids, you have 30 individuals, right?
Eric, just on that note, somebody asked me the other day, and I'm so far out of it, I didn't know the answer. For a kid to graduate in 2022, what standardized tests must they pass? Which part of this what's left from Smarter Balance? And
I don't think do they have to pass any of them, Eric?
I don't have to pass any of them if they meet one of the other graduation pathways.
Yeah.
So you have to either run them through bridge to college classes, or they have to pass the ASVAB at a high enough level, or if they have a 2-year CTE sequence. If they meet one of those other graduation pathways, then they don't have to pass SBAC. They still have to attempt it and take it. In 10th grade, you still have to give the test, and you have to, the state audits you to make sure that you're hitting 95% participation rates, but passing the test is no longer a requirement if you can meet another pathway. The tough thing with that is we haven't been given a lot of time to shift the system,
right?
Help get kids into and through other pathways, but that's happening, and the waivers right now are helping a little bit with cushioning that time, because we're trying to put in a more robust CTE pathway, for example, for our core students that, again, we have no CTE funding, but we still teach CTE classes, have CTE certified educators. And we're trying to create like a marketing, business, entrepreneurship pathway, because that's such a universal thing that kids can use all over the place. And you don't need a ton of money to have fancy equipment to learn those skills. So anyway, but that takes a couple of years. You got to get courses approved through OSPI, and that's like a 6-month ahead process. And again, you got to make sure your teacher has the right certification to be able to teach the class and all that stuff. So there are other processes, thank goodness. It's better than it was.
Yeah, but I mean, just the fact that 95% have to participate, and I mean, it's a de facto requirement, whether it is or, whether they give you some other
and
option.
Money. Can you imagine taking the money that we put into standardized testing
Exactly.
and do something productive for children?
So the time is
5:05. I know.
Yeah. The time is 3 hours for math. It's about 4.5 for ELA, and another couple for science. And that's not just time out of just 10th graders, because you got to mess your whole schedule up to get the 10th graders all to be able to test. And it just messes everything up. Yeah.
I know.
Essentially, it's 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks of learning.
Well, anyway, you guys, it's after 5. And so I want to thank Tammie very, very much for being here.
Thanks,
Tammie,
Tammie.
thank you.
Thanks, you guys. That was, I was a little scared.
You're the best. And I want to
You
thank
know,
Matt very
I-
much for, Matt, thank you very much for facilitating the questions,
Thanks,
bringing them
Matt.
up and starting us out. So thanks, Matt.
I just wanted to say in closing, when I moved when I was 11 to a rural school district, I found out when I got to that district, I was still in elementary, going to head into middle school, that they had a double levy failure. And the consequence of a double levy failure was that they had to cut classes at high school. So they cut the science classes.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, how should you know a community by this sign that they care about science education? And I think our community does care. Tammie, you're part of that.
All right. Well, thank you
Thanks,
very
Rob.
much. And thank you very much, Ian Townley, for coming as well. It was nice to see you, as well as the other folks who are regulars at these. We'll be doing another one of these in May. And I believe our guest is going to be Darcelina Solara, who is the Eastern Washington rep for Charter School Association. And I think she's going to talk about where we are with charter schools in Washington State, but I'm not positive. So we're working on that. But we'll be doing another conversation in May anyway. So keep an eye on our website for updates on that. We'll also post this recording on the website along with a short blog about what we did. And so look there if you want someone else to listen to what Tammie was saying about science and education. Anything else?
Okay. Have a great evening.
All right. Thanks, you
That's all.
guys.
Thanks, Tammie.
Thanks, Tammie.
Thanks.